I want to ask you both about this issue, which it's parallel really to the Prime Minister and his talks in the United States, Dave. But I think it's very much relevant to it. It's this China bid to become part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that trade deal. What do you think of that? I see some analysts saying that we should be encouraging them for our economic strategic interests to get involved, and therefore they'd have to rein in their coercive behaviour. What's your thinking on it, Dave?
I'm highly sceptical about it, Kieran. I think their attempt to join is an attempt to frustrate the organisation. I'm prepared to be convinced otherwise. But, the problem that we've had to date in our economic relationship with China is not the lack of commitments, it's China's failure to adhere to those commitments. So why would new commitments in the Trans-Pacific Partnership made by China be any more likely to be honoured than those it's made to the World Trade Organization, for instance, or to Australia within our FTA? I think is the question you'd have to ask yourself there. I think this is more an exercise in blocking, if you like, than it is in advancing. The TPP is a sort of high ambition, highly liberalised trade agreement. Obviously, China isn't in it, and that's of concern to them as a matter of sort of geopolitical positioning. And I think what we're seeing here from them is an attempt to make sure that they can use their role in an organisation like that to frustrate progress, as they've done in other international organisations. So, look, I'm prepared to be convinced otherwise, but my initial reaction is one of high scepticism.
Peter, the argument that's been made that I've seen in favour of engaging is that if you look at reform, and I know that it has not been that forthcoming in recent years under President Xi Jinping, but if you look at reform in that country, it's often driven by international leverage. That's the point.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Kieran. I wouldn't be as highly sceptical as Dave, or even have my starting position as one where we assume they're not going to engage in good faith. I think Dave would have to agree with this, we all want China to be a responsible partner, to work within the international rules-based order, and that especially goes to engagement in trade and through the framework of international law around trade, because it benefits all of us. And we need to bring Xi and the Chinese government back towards engaging on that front in those frameworks. So this is actually something that's possibly a positive, and we should start off in good faith rather than assuming the worst about them. And that'd be my view going into that. And we're all going to have a look at the TPP. Both Dave and I, we're chair and deputy chair of the Treaties Committee, so we'll probably be doing that work.
Now, just finally, I want to get both of your thoughts as foreign policy experts. Dave, first to you on the Prime Minister's aims this week. What's a successful week for Scott Morrison in New York and Washington?
Well, I think it's a number of things. I mean, firstly, the meetings in Washington, the Quad meeting of leaders is very important. It's the first in-person meeting of the Quad, as I understand it. I think in this configuration, it's still relatively speaking, a new US administration, and so making sure we've got their measure and we understand some of their priorities and perspectives. Unfortunately, the Japanese Prime Minister Suga will not be in office for that much longer. That's a bit of a shame, because obviously this is Japan's a very important part of that partnership. But I think it'll be a similar international agenda to what we've discussed and prosecuted elsewhere at the G20 and the G7 and other meetings. It's really about the stability and security and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific, and how our four countries can work together to support and buttress the liberal rules-based order, which has done so much to support the stability and the prosperity of the Indo-Pacific since over the last 70 years. So, anything from open and liberal trade, support to the global trading system, support for important rights like freedom of navigation, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the settlement of disputes by arbitration rather than the use of force. All of those sorts of things I think will be on the table with these countries.
Peter Khalil, last word to you on that. What would you see as a success for the Prime Minister's visit? And I ask you that in the context as well as someone who used to work for Kevin Rudd, and I do recall that, at the time, and it was a very different international climate, to be fair to him, and but he backed away from the Quad as a mechanism, didn't he?
Well, Kieran, I would hope that Prime Minister Morrison doesn't stuff up. I mean, we are in a very, very sensitive and volatile period. The geostrategic tectonic plates have shifted considerably. We need to be more nimble. We need to be more dynamic in our relationships. We need to have multi-dimensional partnerships. While the Quad and the AUKUS are well and good, I've always argued for us as a middle power to actually be far more dynamic, have a middle power fulcrum where we're working with multiple countries, trilaterals, quadrilaterals, with different formulations and a myriad of different combinations to actually address the many, many issues that we're facing. Because the more engagement that you have and the more of these countries in the region are working together on issue by issue, the more you're going to prop up that liberal international rules-based order. And I just hope that Scott Morrison is not the proverbial bull in the china shop, use the pun there, but that he actually can understand the nuances that are needed. It was a very different time in the past, and part of the reason that the Quad, that Kevin Rudd didn't support the Quad at the time, was very different than today. And so things have changed considerably, and I think it's a good thing to have this relationship with those countries in the region, whether it be Japan, South Korea, India, the US. More engagement is better. It provides a counterweight to those countries, whether it be China or others, who wish to try and break away from the rules-based order.
Peter Khalil, Dave Sharma, gentlemen, appreciate your insights. Thanks.